What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel where we use AI to predict some of the wildest political scenarios with zero bias or emotions. Now, picture this: Zelensky as the president of the United States and Trump as the president of Ukraine. Sounds insane, right? But what if it actually happened? What would the US and Ukraine look like under their leaderships? Here's the real kicker: how would the world totally flip with these two in charge? Today, we're diving deep into this mind-blowing what-if scenario, using AI to predict how Zelensky would run the US and what Trump would do with Ukraine. We're talking policies, global impact, and how their totally different leadership styles would change everything as we know it. Want to see how it all plays out? Stick around because this is going to be wild. But before we jump in, hit that like button and smash that subscribe so you never miss out on more jaw-dropping predictions. I drop new videos every week, and you don't want to miss it. Alright, let's get into this insane ride. To start, let's explain to our friend ChatGPT what it needs to do today. It's going to enter an imaginary world where Zelensky is the president of the USA and Trump is the president of Ukraine, and then answer our questions. Let's ask it to get creative and really let its imagination run wild. So here's the first question. How did Zelensky win the elections in the USA? And what program did he offer to Americans? Let's see what ChatGPT has to say. Zelensky won the US elections by tapping into the American public's desire for change. With his background as an outsider, a comedian, and a champion of transparency, he ran on a bold campaign promising to drain the swamp and bring fresh energy to Washington. His platform was built on social media outreach, strong anti-corruption measures, and a focus on unity. Zelensky's program emphasized investing in education, healthcare, and tech innovation, as well as strengthening international alliances, especially with NATO, and improving relations with Ukraine. His charisma and relatable man of the people vibe struck a chord with voters, especially those disillusioned with traditional politicians. Zelensky winning in the US? Imagine that. His outsider status and charisma would totally shake things up in Washington. Like, who would have thought a comedian could become president? His anti-corruption promises and focus on tech, education, and healthcare could definitely bring some fresh energy to a system that feels stuck in the past. And hey, his focus on international alliances, especially with NATO, would probably make global politics way more interesting. Honestly, this could be the kind of shake-up America needs. Presidents usually come up with slogans to boost patriotism in their countries. So, what kind of slogans could Zelensky come up with for the USA? Considering his background in creativity and acting, let's see what kind of catchphrases he might create to inspire the American people. During Zelensky's presidency in the US, memes and slogans reflected his outsider status, charisma, and focus on change. Here are 5 popular examples. 1. Make America Zelensky again, a twist on Trump's famous slogan, symbolizing the desire for fresh leadership and a break from traditional politics. 2. Zelensky's America, no drama, just action. This slogan played on his image as someone who preferred direct action over political gamesmanship, making him relatable to younger voters. 3. From comedian to commander-in-chief. A meme that humorously highlighted his transition from TV star to world leader, often paired with exaggerated dramatic captions about his surprising rise. 4. Zelensky is the Wi-Fi of America, connecting people. A meme about his ability to unite Americans, especially online, through his social media savvy and engaging public appearances. 5. Simplicity is the new power. A popular meme showing Zelensky in casual clothes, portraying him as a regular guy who represents change, contrasting with the polished, formal appearance of traditional politicians. LOL, can you imagine these memes blowing up? Make America Zelensky. Again, honestly, it's got a ring to it, right? And the no drama, just action one hits home. No more political nonsense, just getting stuff done. The whole from comedian to commander-in-chief thing is pure gold too. Like, who saw that coming? Also, can we talk about how Zelensky would totally be the Wi-Fi of America? connecting all of us online? His relatable vibe and casual clothes? Honestly, that would be a total power move. Keep it simple, keep it real. Zelenskyy was a huge star in Ukraine, known for his work on comedy shows, being a judge on those shows, and acting in films. But did he become just as popular in Hollywood? Let's ask our friend ChatGPT if this happened, and how it all went down. Yes, Zelenskyy did become a Hollywood star during his time as president of the US, and his transition from a comedic TV star to a political figure actually played in his favor. Much like in Ukraine, his media-savvy, charming persona made him a natural in the limelight. Hollywood embraced him, with cameos in films, TV shows, and even hosting big events like the Oscars. He became the face of celebrity politics, often appearing on talk shows and in viral skits, blending his comedic past with his presidential role. His public speeches often included humorous, down-to-earth moments that captivated both the American public and the entertainment industry. This combination of politics and showbiz made him a star not only in the White House but on the global stage too. Okay, Zelenskyy, as a Hollywood star, total flex. From TV comedian to hosting the Oscars, that's some next-level stuff right there. Imagine him dropping one-liners at international summits, mixing politics with stand-up. He definitely knew how to keep it real, bringing that relatable, down-to-earth vibe that made people actually want to listen. And the blend of comedy with leadership? Pure genius, making politics fun, accessible, and a little bit glamorous. If this was the celebrity politics era, Zelenskyy was the king of it. Now, let's shift the focus to Trump. We've all seen him constantly giving Zelenskyy advice, saying he's not grateful for what he has. So, let's see. What if Trump were in charge of Ukraine? What policies and laws would he change first? Let's ask ChatGPT to imagine that scenario. Trump's presidency in Ukraine completely shifted the country's policy and approach to international relations, as he brought a more direct and often controversial style to foreign diplomacy. Here are the key changes and laws that emerged under Trump's influence. 1. Stronger nationalism and anti-corruption laws. Trump emphasized a America First approach, urging Ukraine to adopt stronger nationalistic policies and cracking down on corruption. His administration pushed for laws that prioritized Ukrainian sovereignty, focused on rooting out corruption within the government, and gave more power to local governments to combat it. 2. Enhanced military support and NATO alignment. Trump significantly increased military aid to Ukraine, including advanced defense systems, and pushed for Ukraine to align more closely with NATO. This was in line with his focus on strengthening the military presence in Eastern Europe as a counter to Russian influence. 3. Economic sanctions on Russia. Trump imposed stricter sanctions on Russia, which included freezing assets of key Russian oligarchs and military officials tied to the invasion of Crimea and other destabilizing activities in Ukraine. 4. Energy independence laws. One of Trump's first moves was to pass laws promoting energy independence for Ukraine. He encouraged the country to break free from Russian energy dependence by securing deals for U.S. natural gas exports and investments in renewable energy sources. 5th, pro-democracy reforms. Trump pushed for the privatization of state-owned enterprises and reforms in the judicial system to encourage greater foreign investment and strengthen Ukraine's economy by reducing oligarch control over the country. His unorthodox style led to strained relations with traditional European allies, but his support for Ukraine's sovereignty and NATO integration helped the country assert its independence while dealing with the ongoing conflict in the East. Okay, now this is wild. Imagine Trump as the president of Ukraine. Definitely a game changer. His America First attitude turning into Ukraine First. Strong nationalism and anti-corruption laws flying under his leadership. Military aid? Check. Boosting NATO ties? Big time. And those economic sanctions on Russia? Major flex. But what's really crazy is him pushing for energy independence. No more Russian gas. That's a bold move. Overall, Trump's presidency made Ukraine flex its sovereignty like never before, but with a little less love from the EU. Still, under all that controversy, Ukraine was getting support to stand tall. Definitely a wild ride. Since our presidents have switched, the relationship between the USA and Ukraine would change too. But how exactly would it look? And would Zelensky start blaming and arguing with Trump? Let's find out what ChatGPT thinks about this scenario. After the presidential swap, relations between the US and Ukraine underwent significant shifts. Zelensky's presidency in the US brought a fresh, unorthodox dynamic to the relationship, while Trump's leadership in Ukraine introduced a more confrontational and transactional approach. Here's how things changed. 1. Strengthened military and economic ties. Zelensky, with his background in diplomacy, sought to solidify Ukraine's relationship with the US. He emphasized military aid, tech cooperation, and economic partnerships, ensuring continued American support in the fight against Russian aggression. While Trump was more skeptical about international interventions, he ended up boosting Ukraine's military budget, though he often attached conditions related to financial reforms and anti-corruption efforts. 2. Support for NATO. With Zelensky in the White House, there was a stronger push for Ukraine's NATO membership, alongside a more vocal and active American leadership in supporting NATO's expansion in Eastern Europe. Trump's administration in Ukraine, however, remained hesitant about full NATO integration, focusing more on Ukraine's self-reliance and military strength rather than formal membership. 3. Diplomatic tension and public fallout. The swap brought some tensions, especially as Trump's America First policies often clashed with Zelensky's pro-European and pro-globalist inclinations. The US, under Zelensky, sometimes prioritized global alliances, while Trump's Ukraine leaned more towards bilateral deals and skepticism toward global institutions, resulting in occasional diplomatic friction. 4. Public perception and media. Zelensky became a media icon, often seen as a fresh, dynamic leader globally, boosting the US-Ukraine image in the Western world. Meanwhile, Trump's controversial policies and strongman tactics in Ukraine generated mixed feelings among the Ukrainian public, with some seeing him as a necessary ally against Russian aggression, while others felt uneasy about his populist rhetoric and authoritarian tendencies. 5. Russia-US-Ukraine relations. The most dramatic shift came in relations with Russia. Zelensky, leading the US, took a tough stance against Russia, supporting increased sanctions and military aid to Ukraine, while Trump in Ukraine was more pragmatic, occasionally flirting with détente and questioning the extent of American involvement, but still pushing for a strong defense against Russian expansionism. Overall, the swap led to a more complicated and sometimes contradictory relationship between the two nations, with Zelensky's charisma and diplomatic savvy counterbalanced by Trump's unpredictable foreign policy. Despite the tensions, both countries continued to find common ground in resisting Russian influence in Eastern Europe. Yo, the presidential swap is wild. Zelensky in the US pushes for NATO and stronger global ties, while Trump in Ukraine's all about America first and keeping things more self-reliant. It's like two worlds colliding, Zelensky's media charm versus Trump's tough, unpredictable moves. Tension? Yep, but both are still standing strong against Russia. It's messy, but they're in it together. And the last question for today, how would global relations change if Zelensky were in charge of the USA and Trump were ruling Ukraine? Let's see what ChatGPT thinks would happen on the world stage. The switch in leadership between Zelensky and Trump significantly altered the global balance of power and reshaped relations between the US, Europe, and Russia. Here's how. 1. Shift in global power dynamics. US under Zelensky. Zelensky's leadership in the US brought a more diplomatic and cooperative foreign policy, with a focus on multilateralism. This shift empowered international organizations like the UN and NATO, strengthening alliances with Europe and reinforcing a pro-democracy stance. The US became more engaged in global issues like climate change, human rights, and international security, working closely with the European Union and other democratic nations. Trump in Ukraine. Trump's presidency in Ukraine emphasized America first, leading to a more isolationist transactional approach. Trump focused on Ukraine's self-sufficiency and leaned heavily on military aid and deals rather than global cooperation. His presence in Ukraine also pushed the country toward closer alignment with the US, but often strained relations with Europe, particularly when Trump questioned European alliances and criticized the EU for not contributing enough to defense spending. 2. Relations with Europe. US under Zelensky. Europe found a more reliable partner in the US under Zelensky, who embraced European unity and supported policies aimed at countering Russian influence. The US under Zelensky took a leading role in pushing for stronger sanctions on Russia, furthering NATO's role in Eastern Europe, and supporting EU interests, particularly in Ukraine's potential membership. The transatlantic relationship was revitalized, with a focus on solidarity, trade, and security cooperation. Trump in Ukraine. With Trump in Ukraine, relations with Europe became more strained. Trump's skepticism about NATO, his criticism of the EU, and his transactional approach to foreign policy made European leaders uneasy. Europe faced more pressure to pay their fair share in defense, and there was a growing divide on how to approach Russia and security challenges in Eastern Europe. Some European leaders found Trump's style unpredictable, creating friction, especially when it came to issues like climate change or international trade agreements. 3. Strengthening or weakening of NATO and security alliances. US under Zelensky. NATO's influence was bolstered. Zelensky prioritized the alliance's unity, advocating for greater military spending and a more active role in the defense of Eastern Europe, particularly in countering Russian aggression. His presidency helped strengthen the US-EU Defense Pact and reinforced NATO's role as the primary security provider for Europe. Zelensky's diplomatic efforts also sought to bring Ukraine closer to NATO integration, with more European countries supporting the initiative. Trump in Ukraine. Trump, on the other hand, was often critical of NATO, urging European members to spend more on defense and questioning the alliance's relevance. While Trump supported Ukraine's sovereignty, his approach was more focused on getting bilateral concessions, leaving the broader NATO framework somewhat sidelined. European countries had to navigate these tensions, balancing their traditional ties with the US while managing Trump's more isolationist stance. 4. Russia's position. US under Zelensky. The switch made Russia view the US with more caution. Under Zelensky, the US took a harder line on Russia, maintaining economic sanctions and increasing military aid to Ukraine. Zelensky's push for European solidarity also united the West in opposition to Russian interference in Ukraine and other parts of Eastern Europe. Trump in Ukraine. Trump's presidency in Ukraine led to a more complex dynamic with Russia. While he still opposed Russian aggression, his transactional approach and openness to personal diplomacy with Vladimir Putin raised concerns about potential concessions to Russia. This shift in tone created uncertainty in Europe, with some leaders questioning the reliability of the US in facing Russian expansionism. 5. Global influence and soft power. US under Zelensky. Zelensky's presidency brought a boost to America's soft power. His media-savvy, charismatic leadership made him an international figure, and the US became more actively involved in promoting democracy and human rights globally. This helped the US maintain influence in Europe and beyond, positioning itself as a defender of liberal values and international cooperation. Trump in Ukraine. Trump's leadership in Ukraine was more focused on strategic and economic goals, often sidelining soft power in favor of direct negotiations and personal diplomacy. While this approach created some successes, it diminished the US. And there you have it, folks. What if Zelensky ran the US and Trump ruled Ukraine? Would it totally shake up the world? We've just scratched the surface, but one thing's for sure. The future would look way different. So, what do you think? Could these two lead their countries like we predicted? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below because I'm dying to hear your take on this wild scenario. And remember, if you loved this deep dive, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss out on more crazy AI predictions. I drop new content every week, and you don't want to miss it. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one, where we predict even crazier stuff.